Mr. Hurt?
Here.
Mr. Moore? Ms. Drago? Ms. Washington? Here. Mr. Hoitzma?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Barhu?
Present.
Mr. Harper?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I guess we want to hear
We're going to have our consultants come up. They've got a short presentation, kind of an overview and where we've been, where we're going. What I suggest we do is we hear from them. There are a few updates to the code I want to go through, and then we hear from the public, and then we'd be happy to drill down and get into any questions you got. But if we can move through that, I think that'll make it go quicker. So I'll turn it over to Craig Richardson with Clarion Associates.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Craig Richardson. I am a director with Clarion Associates. We've been working with Rich and your staff for the last 4.5 years on the code update. It has been a long process. It's always a challenging undertaking in any community, but I think we're close to the finish line, so that's good news. With me tonight is Stephen Sizemore, who is a colleague and professional with our firm. Stephen has done a lot of work on this code draft, and we both are going to make this short presentation for you. What we would like to do is several things. First of all, we just want to take a few minutes and sort of outline for you how we got to where we are right now. It has been a lengthy process, and I think it's important to...
Just a second. Just a second. I want to know, can you all hear in the back? Yes? Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. I'll continue to speak up if I can. Then what we would like to do is talk about the goals. We set some goals out for this project. I say we, the community, the city of Daytona, at the outset, and we're going to go over for you how those goals have been addressed and sort of in a brief summary way, and how some of the new changes in the LDC. So that's where we're going to go. In terms of the actual process and schedule, as I said, this has been about a 4.5-year process. As you can see from the slide presentations, we really broke it down into 4 fundamental tasks. We kicked the project off before we began, and during that process, beyond us, the consultants working with staff, getting current on your existing regulations and plan, we also did a number of interviews and meetings with review boards to get input from them about what they felt like were the problems that needed to be addressed in this update, as well as the goals for the project. From that, we synthesized that input from them and did an independent evaluation of your current regulations and developed something we called a diagnosis annotated outline. That was task 2. And basically what that document was is a policy document. It was about 60 or 70 pages, where in the diagnosis we identified the goals for the project, which I'll talk about in a minute, and talked in layperson's language about some concepts or sort of best practice options for the city to address those goals and our problems. And then prepared an outline, a detailed outline of what the new code would look like if those issues were addressed as the way we suggested. We had a number of meetings with the public and with the some of the review boards and the economic development board's advisory committee that had been set up. Got input, made some refinements to that document, and after the end of that process, had a good roadmap in terms of what we needed to do in terms of the drafting. We then went to task 3, and actually we drafted, prepared an initial draft of the LDC. We did it in 3 installments. This is a very big document, as I'm sure you're very aware. And so we broke it down into these 3 installments, one dealing with procedures, one dealing with the zoning districts and the uses, and the third dealing with the development standards. So that's sort of how the installments were divided. After each of the installments was completed, that information was made available to the public. This was, I believe, beginning in 2011, and it was about a 2-year period that we went through this drafting. But we met with the advisory committee and the economic development group. We met with the planning board on some occasions and the council on some occasions, and had public meetings on every one of these drafts. But we got we got input, and based upon that input, we made further revisions. In fact, went through several revisions to the document, and then went to step 4, which was the code testing. And in the code testing, what we did was we actually, working with, and this was a role undertaken primarily by your staff and some local and some consultants in Daytona, and some local professionals, architects, engineers. They actually took the new code and went and identified specific development sites with the different kind of uses that they wanted to develop, and said, this is what we could do under the current regulations, and this is what we could do under the new regulations. So just to measure whether or not the new regulations were achieving the goals that were originally set out. So that was done. There were some refinements to the regulations based upon that testing. Again, another set of refinements. And then after that was done, we then went through several iterations of a public hearing draft of the LDC. And that was really the last task. I think collectively, over this process, there have been over 22 or 23 public meetings at various stages in this process with the public, with the advisory committee and the economic development group, the planning board, and the city council. And so there have been a number of meetings leading up to, over these years, that have led up to where we are today. So that's the process. So it's been lengthy. There has been a lot of input. There's been a lot of opportunity for input. And it's been a very systematic process where we started with a policy document. We did drafting, incremental drafting, got input, made further revisions to testing, then drafted this public review draft. In terms of the goals that were set out, these were goals that were set out 4 years ago, and they really haven't been modified. These overriding goals haven't been modified. There are 6 or 7. Sort of the key goal was to implement the comprehensive plan and the vision plan that was developed by the city of Daytona Beach. And within that, with sort of what is subsumed in that overriding goal were the following goals: make the land development code more user-friendly, number 1. 2, increase efficiency of the development review process and encourage economic development by streamlining reviews, by using or developing standards that were much more measurable and created a much more certainty in the development process and the expectations of the community for what would be developed. Preserving the character of your single-family residential neighborhoods, which was very important. Modernizing and simplifying the zone districts. Encouraging compatible redevelopment and infill, and encouraging economic development. That's primarily to be done by removing obstacles to redevelopment in your current regulations. Enhancing development quality, and incorporating sustainable development standards. Those were the goals for the project. With respect to how those goals were achieved, They were achieved in a number of ways, and I'm going to summarize some of those for you, and then Stephen's going to conclude with 3 or 4 other examples. In terms of making the LDC more user-friendly, one of the first things we did was we reorganized the structure of the code itself. And what we did was we consolidated all the provisions related to the procedures, the review of development, into one article. We created a set of standard procedures that would apply to any development application, and then set out specific procedures referencing those standard procedures for the individual development applications. We codified some procedures that you were in practice using but weren't in your current regulations, and I think we clarified the procedures for a number of the individual review procedures. The second sort of organization consolidation was of your zoning districts. And we did that. We put all of that related information into 2 chapters. One was called zoning districts, and one dealing with the uses and use standards. We then consolidated the development standards so into several chapters. Then, in addition to that, we changed the reformat. I won't go into the details, and added a lot of graphics. On this slide I have, I'm talking of, you can see an example of one of the zone districts we did. Several other things that we did to, I think, make the code more user-friendly, and again, this is using this idea of consolidating and summarizing, is we created a summary table of the development review procedures. That's at the beginning of the 3rd chapter. We refined I mentioned the standard review procedures. We made it very clear within those procedures, and I think this is important, in terms of what types of applications are going to have to do what we call a pre-application meeting, meet with staff before the application's filed. We included specific provisions for neighborhood meetings, something that we identified early in the process, and completed or clarified a number of other procedures. We consolidated in this standard procedures section all of the public notification requirements into a table. So someone can go to one section in the standard procedures, and they can see what the public notification requirements, whether it's posting in putting the notification in a newspaper, or mailing it, or posting it, what that requirement is for each of the development applications. In terms of increasing efficiency, we did several things. Number one was we actually we divided site plan into major and minor, carried that forward, but then increased the threshold for minor site plans, which are reviewed by staff, to 20,000 square feet, which streamlined the review process. We also added a lot of very specific standards, so the staff has very clear direction in terms of what standards that are to be applied when they review a site plan. We added additional flexibility through an administrative adjustment, which allows for very specifically has thresholds, but allows for minor changes or deviations from some of the dimensional standards in the code. For example, if someone is on a lot that impinges into a side setback by a foot, you can get an administrative, or you need to do that to construct a house. It's not going to impact adjacent property. You can come in and request an administrative adjustment. It will be reviewed by staff. There are specific criteria you have to comply with. If you meet the criteria, then you can have it done. You don't need to go through a variance process. So we have used this in a number of mature communities We have a lot of developed area like Daytona Beach does today, and they have found in practice that it is extremely helpful. It will streamline development review. It basically prevents someone doesn't have to go through a variance process. They can just use an administrative adjustment. We created a common procedure for all planned developments. We set down very specifically a framework for what has to be included in planned developments. Just really there clarifying language and a framework. We consolidated all the appeal provisions into one section, again, which makes it easier to use. In terms of dealing with the protection of your single-family neighborhoods, we have included in the development standards a specific new section of the code where that includes specific standards that multifamily or non-residential development has to comply with if they are locating, for example, on a commercial corridor that backs onto a single-family neighborhood. The types of issues that are addressed there are the height of that adjacent multifamily or commercial development. It has to be stepped down. In other words, if you're within a certain number of feet of the single-family lot, you can only go up 3 stories. If you're maybe 75 feet or 50 feet, and it's stepped up. We have provisions that require that the location of parking be away from the adjacent single-family development, or that would be the number one priority, that it be located away from single-family. We have provisions dealing where open space requirements have to be located. The preference is adjacent to single-family. We have provisions that require buffers to be put in, or walls or fencing to be put in. We have provisions dealing with and placing limits on the operation of the facility so that they shut down by 10:30 or 11 at night. So there's a whole list of these minimum standards that are in the ordinance that will apply in these particular situations. With respect to modernizing and simplifying the zone districts, on this next slide I'll show you. I'm showing this. This sort of goes to the issue of user friendliness also, but we I think condensed the treatment of zone districts into 2, 3, 4 pages in most instances, and where we included the purpose statements, the dimensional standards, and then added photographs and 3-dimensional graphics that show how what the application of the dimensional standards would look like in the zone districts. We did some consolidation, not a significant amount of consolidation of your zone districts. In other words, collapsing some relative to some codes we've done in the past. The most significant place where we were able to consolidate your zone districts were in the residential districts. We carried forward, for the most part, the redevelopment districts. There were some that were new districts that were added. There were several that were deleted. In terms of encouraging compatible redevelopment, economic development, one of the other things that we did in looking at your standards was we attempted to tailor more your off-street parking standards. The other thing that we did in terms of providing flexibility and removing obstacles to redevelopment was we included what are called contextual standards for lot area and setbacks on all sides of a lot and height on the lot. And really, those were included and have been included in a lot of codes in mature areas to deal with the nonconformity issue. In other words, basically what that rule does is it says if your setbacks in lot area are within a certain percentage, 120% of the average on a block where you live, then that supersedes the dimensional standards in the zoning ordinance, and that's what controls, and you're not nonconforming. And our thinking, and we work with staff on this, is that should address a lot of the nonconformities in the community. So that was done. We also have included what we call alternative compliance provisions, which would allow for modest modifications to parking standards or landscaping standards if alternative ideas that still generally comply with these provisions can be developed. I talked about the administrative adjustment. We also believe that will improve or remove some obstacles for redevelopment. Excuse me, I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself. We have modernized the parking standards. We have added a lot of alternative parking options, like we carried forward the shared parking and the on-site parking, but we've added deferred parking. We have provisions that would allow for reduction in parking for transportation demand management, location close to transit or bus stops. We have included a cap on commercial development at 125% of the minimum, something a number of communities have done. We have added access and connectivity standards, refined your landscaping standards, added some very specific measurable standards for open space set-asides, added some exterior lighting standards, and we've consolidated your alcohol and beverage standards. Finally, we have added some incentives, not requirements, but incentives for those developers who want to include sustainable development practices in their projects. Whether it's the use of alternative energy, or LEED certification, or water conservation. We are offering, there's a menu list and a point system, and the developers can pick and choose. They need a certain number of points, and if they're able to achieve those points, then they can either get density bonuses or a one-story increase in height, reduce parking in some instances, or increase sign area on signage. So in sum, that is the new code, and thank you.
Thank you. And some of your, you need anything? No? Take care of it. Okay. You go from there.
Next, I wanted to go in, the draft all of you received is the clean version. The advisory board and the economic advisory board assistants and many members of the public are meeting very regularly, and there is a strike through and underline from the last version that those people saw. You don't have to worry about that. That's why we gave you the clean version that makes the strike through and underline into a clean version. But had you read all those other ones, you wouldn't have had to read this new one. You could have just looked at that strike through and underline. That is online for those that followed that. But the version you have before you, that strike through and underline, staff is recommending that. Now, in the time that we've been using that, and I need to preface this by saying that there will be no illusion that this big of a job of totally rewriting this code will take care of everything. We won't need to make changes. Our current code, obviously, we've had to make changes. As we start using this more and more, we will find things, but in the time that we were using that, we spent a lot of time working with the VCARD group. They really provide a lot of assistance. That group is the users, they're members of the public that were also attending those meetings. We met almost weekly for a couple months. As a result of that included basically some additional testing. The real users of this, we made some changes, we found some errors, but I don't want to leave anyone with the illusion that we get to the end and we get an adoption that we are still going to find some things and need to come back at some point in the future. I think, though, that everyone that I have dealt with and worked with believes this is more user-friendly. It's met all of our goals. It is better than what we've got, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that there won't be some things that will come up. But I do want to, everyone has a copy of this chart. These are in addition to the document as written. We want to point these things out in terms of the staff recommendation. We'd like for you to recommend approval of this with these changes. These are things we found. Many of these are typos or very minor things. We could drill down into these if anyone has a specific question later, but my suggestion is I go through this, kind of answer any real high-level questions we hear from the public, and then you can drill down into anything you want to. The consultants here have quite a few staff, but that might be the fastest way to get through this. I will generally go through this, though. The first one, that's really just a typo, change chapter to code. The second one, we've got a duplication a couple places. E-zone, that's a typo. The third one, we had added a new use, a cigar lounge, and the intent of that was to, under some certain criteria, and it really works for the project over on A1A, the cigar, two-story cigar place over there. They wanted to be able to sell beer and wine with a large inventory of their retail. We felt that was appropriate, and the original draft that we have in here said the alcohol in association with food and beverage would be allowed as an accessory. It didn't really provide for the retail, so we've got some suggested changes that do allow for, there's actually some typos with that, with the T3 and T4, but it would allow for the cigar lounge in association with the same criteria of the inventory, the hours of operation, et cetera, in association with a retail establishment. The next one, the MS district, we have one piece of property still with the MS zoning. As you know, a lot of that district was written, I think, primarily for the Speedway. Most of their stuff was rezoned. There's still one piece that exists. It's south of the airport, and so we want to keep that in the code, even though it really only deals with the one piece of property, and we'll suggest that be added back. Same with TM. TM is on some of our existing mobile home parks. We were hoping to not have that, and those regulations will not apply for a newly proposed mobile home park, but we need to keep the TM district for the existing mobile home parks. The next two are just appendix things. As you know, as part of this, there are some appendix things of letting applicants know what they provide, and have some changes we want to include with that. The next one is actually ordinances. This project's been going on so long, we've amended this code, and they happened after Clarion gave us this document, so this Article 14 is some of these comprehensive sign plan things that we've already put in our code that wouldn't be in this version, so we want to make sure that those are carried forward with the changes you've already recommended approval for and have been adopted. Model home regulations, we really didn't have a whole lot of regulations. We've had these in draft form for a while. We've kind of been using them. We'll put those in the code. It talks about when you can get the model homes and how that process works. Some of these were very specific requests by VCARD. We met with them today, went through this list, and I think you'll hear from them that based on their engineers, architects, engineers, planners, attorneys, they're comfortable with the document, with these recommendations. Economic development, was just a typo as well. That needs to be replaced with than. Correct inconsistencies between the development procedures and the review procedures. Some of the places, the TPO has changed names since this project started. It is now called the R2C TPO, and some of the places it was changed, not all of them. That's, again, just typos. We wanted to encourage brew pubs in as many places as were appropriate. Some of the redevelopment areas that weren't listed, we're going to add those to the chart as allowing brew pubs in those. A couple of these are in Midtown and the rest are in downtown. actually on the beach side. As you know, there's a charter amendment going forward with relative to the number of planning board members. Whatever comes out of that needs to be codified accordingly. If it doesn't pass, what is in our current code would stay. Our current code is based on the current charter. The next one at the top of the second page is pain management clinics. When we started this, was back before the legislature did anything. We had all the pill mills, and so this document had said we wanted to prohibit those. As a result of the state statutes, there are some pain management clinics that are licensed by the state and are permitted. So the pain management clinic definition in here, as well as a reference to medical treatment facilities on pain management, we're going to recommend be deleted because those are in the charts say they're prohibited. However, in the definition for medical or dental clinics and office does allow for those that are consistent with state law and would be permitted there, and those are shown to be permitted in the chart. The check cashing, again, it was listed as prohibited everywhere. We can't have that prohibited everywhere, so we've recommended that that be put back in and remove the prohibited from only the B1, B2, and BA areas. Tattooing establishments, again, same kind of thing. We had to allow that somewhere. Right now it's in the M5. This language is being proposed to be changed back just the way our current code reads, where it's allowed in the M5 zoning district only. Change the label on table 3.2 from pre-op neighborhood meeting to the neighborhood meeting. That's really just a typo. Definition of places of worship. I'll say that one to the end as I'll come back to that. Because I know there are some questions on that, and maybe I can answer some of that. You also have in your package tonight, Pat Drago, who could not be here. She did provide a letter. Generally, she's very supportive of the document and the process. She did have one specific suggestion in Article 4 dealing with the code talks about Washingtonian and cabbage palms. She wanted that changed. That's in our existing code, so we would just suggest as in accordance with what she recommended that we just remove the Washington, and it really had to do with having a mixture of palms. I don't think we should identify specifically Washingtonian cabbage, et cetera, so we would just say remove the word Washington. It'll allow for the same concept. Some of her other things are really more as we move forward. She suggested some things about having joint meetings maybe with historic preservation and redevelopment boards, providing more flexibility when we get into more historic designations. You know, she was on the historic preservation board for a while, so very supportive of the concepts in here, and just some suggestions as we go forward. And I'm sure she'll be able to speak for herself when those come back as amendments that we have. Some of her ideas were also as we implement the E-zone. You'll see there's a placeholder in here. It is in our comp plan, but we don't have the specifics. We're still working on some of the details. She strongly encourages the community parking, the community large retention areas that are part of the E-zone concept. Those details haven't been worked out. That's primarily why this hasn't come back. And she's made some suggestions on that. Thinks that it'd be very beneficial rather than have little parking lots and little retention ponds, have bigger ones. And she strongly encourages the movement forward of that idea, but we're not there yet. So, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about medical marijuana. Our code, the legislature actually provided some language, and it's also going to be a charter amendment coming up. We have nothing in our code for it, so we're suggesting adding in this definition and permitted in the M5. Chances are when you get done with the charter amendments and more legislation, et cetera, that we may want to come back and revisit it, but we wanted to get something in our code now before that happens, so we're suggesting we add that in. In the list, the chart under Article 3 of mandatory neighborhood meetings, it did not list comprehensive plan amendments. Those can be pretty big, so we're going to suggest that be mandatory on comprehensive plan amendments. There's places of worship here. Clarion has provided a memo. It is in your package there are places of worship are very strongly controlled. There's federal regulations protecting how you treat them and how you deal with them. And to do anything regulating them would require quite a bit of background research. We did not want to hold this code up. Clarion has provided some suggestions. We really need some direction before we start spending a lot of research on different ways to do it. We could treat it similar, very large. Well, first off, we need to treat all places of assembly or things that generate the same kind of traffic or same kind of parking impacts the same. We can't just single churches out versus other places of assembly. So however we're going to do this, whether we're going to treat the large ones and say they need to be on intersections of two arterials, and smaller ones can go in the neighborhoods, or we want to deal with those on a special use permit process. We need some policy direction before we get to that. We didn't want to bog this down. So our suggestion is you see this, you read this, we not dig into that, we move this forward, and just like our historic preservation and some of our signage regulations and things that have had years where it went through on amendments, those were very well negotiated. We asked Clarion not to change those and not reopen those. If we want to tackle any of those after this is done, that's our suggestion on that. And then last is the memo you have from Pat. I just want to make sure that was on the record. You all had a copy of that. Now, we met with VCAR today, went through this list to share with them what we were going to do tonight, hear their comments. They had given us a bunch of questions that we gave them response to as a result of today. There was another item that they raised that we had the time after this chart was prepared before tonight. I'm going to pass this down. This is an additional suggestion. It deals with concurrency. It really has more to do with some of the very technical interpretations of concurrency. These are what we would suggest also be part of the changes that we put in the code. And really, it's not clear at the time what time you have to submit for a concurrency certificate. I think this clarifies it. I think VCAR can speak for themselves, but I think what might have been a gray area, this language will help improve. I think everyone was in agreement with that, so staff would add this to this list as part of your recommendation. I do know there are some members of the public that have some specific comments that they've raised. One of which I do want to point out and talk about, because I know it's going to be raised, is the discussion of if you have a structure and it's damaged significantly, whether you can build it back if it's non-conforming. In our draft you have before you, it's actually on, if you have your code in front of you, it's on page 8-4. It's under the section dealing with non-conforming structures. It says under E there at the very top of page 8.4, under that section is all dealing with non-conforming structures. It says reconstruction or repair after casualty damage, except as otherwise provided in section 614C, floodplain management. The reconstruction or repair of a non-conforming structure has been damaged as a result of a natural disaster or other unforeseen and preventable accident or occurrence shall be subject to following provisions. That deals with 65% of the value, which is what we're doing today. But we committed to the advisory board and the public very early on that we would exempt out, and it says that at the end of that, however, this section shall not apply to owner-occupied single-family detached dwellings. So if someone has an owner-occupied single-family detached dwelling, and that there's damage over 65%, they would be allowed to build that single-family dwelling back. And so that is in the code. I know that's going to come up, but if people want to change the language, put it in more places in the code, whatever, we're open to listen to that. But I think this is pretty clear. I think you're going to hear from some people there some comments about it, but this is actually clearer than what's in our current code. And I know the issue and the commitment from the staff has been that we would exempt and allow owner-occupied single-family detached dwellings that are non-conforming to be built back. So I would suggest that we open it up to the public. At the end, we drill down into any specific questions you got. We got a lot of help here to answer that, but it might be better to hear from the public and then answer your questions.
All right. Are there any comments from the public that you'd like to come forward for?
got a sheet there for me. Beautiful. Thanks, guys. Let me pull this out here. Standard 3-minute. I'll keep it to. Is that what we're working with? Okay, very good. Understood. I know the commission keeps it pretty strict sometimes. So,
What's your name and address?
I will. I will. Jerry Nolan. The property we're discussing is at 151 South Grandview Avenue, titled to Cotona Partners. I'm addressing you here today after an exchange of emails with the property's owner, managing member, Rich Wilcox. Understanding that there's probably no perfect place in this process to become engaged in it. We've attended some of the public meetings. I think I've spoken the last 2 or 3 years on the matter. When we go back to the visioning debate, I know I spoke to a number of those workshops. So, I mean, we've been engaged in this process. The community's been engaged in this process. But what we're finding is we look at and read the clean version today online, what is 784 pages. I mean, I look at you guys, I do not envy the task ahead of you in trying to get this under control. But you look at the red line version, you look at the clean version, you go through this, and you begin to notice little elements. Everything looks great until you take it down to what it means to you. And so what does this mean to Cotona Partners as we look to be an engaged property owner in the redevelopment of the beach side? And so I'm going to distribute to you a packet with several items in it. I've got 5 copies of it, so I'm going to go one back here to Clarion, I'm going to go one to the right side of the room, one to the front of the room, and one to the back of the room. There's a graphic included in the overview that I had hoped that we'd be able to present. I understand now that you have a policy that requires a 48-hour notice before we use the screen. I can only imagine why that policy had to be invoked, but we will abide by it. I'm going to read this letter from Rich, or my letter to Rich, and maybe start out with his comment back to me immediately less than a couple hours ago. You've done an excellent job on this. I'm completely in agreement with your analysis. So with that then said, I jump down towards the bottom of the page. It says, Rich, at tonight's regular meeting of the planning board, they will see the final draft of the city's rewrite. My understanding is that they will be making the recommendations to the City Commission to approve or disapprove. Cotona Partners should have 3 concerns within this final draft of the LDC to be adopted tonight. First, that the previously adopted text amendment to the LDC on December 19th, 2007, I might add, was a unanimous adoption of the City Commission. Of the City Commission of Plan Development is not properly noted in the draft now before the board. And what was adopted back there on the 19th said all development from International Speedway Boulevard to Harvey Avenue between Grandview and A1A shall be planned development. Again, that planned development is in capital letters, with heights required to transition from commercial and A1A to residential along Grandview Avenue. Cotona Partners LLC needs reassurance in the final versions adopted by the city that their property continues with this important designation, noting specific use of the capitalization planned development in all agendas, minutes, and of the December 19, 2007 City Commission meeting. This agreed planned development designation has been a core of the expectations of the Cotona Partners LLC, adjacent property owners, and potential buyers and investors. The PD, planned development designation, will allow the designated area to design and fund and final real estate products that will fit within the rapidly emerging redevelopment needs of an area that now has additional active investor interest with the arrival of Eddie Hennessy's efforts with the storied Streamline Hotel. Second, that during the LDC rewrite process that many individuals had believed that the RP zoning districts would be combined into the BP zoning district. This does not appear to be the case as now drafted. This LDC draft keeps both zoning designations. However, what is described in the BP district seems to be better articulate the previously conveyed city entitlements for the property. This LDC draft appears to differ from previous drafts of the BP, where previously residential densities of 10 duplex units per acre were permitted, and now it is 40 duplex units per acre. However, RP remains at only 20 duplex units per acre. Understanding the aforementioned height amendment transitioning between A1A and Grandview, Cotona Partners needs reassurance in the final LDC version adopted that the 35-foot heights fronting Grandview Avenue are accurate and that height elevations are permitted as the building steps back away from the setback, and respectfully request that the RP district have the densities at BP at 40 duplex units per acre. And then you see the final, if you're in agreement with this, please email me back. So those are our concerns. The designation of planned development by the City Commission allowing us. So what happens is, if I understand, we can have a planned residential development anything in excess of 1 acre, which we meet with the Cotona properties where we're at 1.28 acres. We meet that criteria. There is a verbiage in previous land development code that suggests that to pursue a planned development status requires 2 acres. However, the designation of the city back there on December 19th says that all development in that area will be planned development. So we want to confirm with the city that we are in fact able to pursue a planned development course with this property, and we want to confirm with them at this time as we do this zoning that in fact their intentions when they were bumping BP and RP potentially together and combining them, that as they pulled the two back apart, that we're keeping the robustness, for lack of a better term, some robustness and some density to the RP district that will allow us to find the appropriate partners to a successful transition on the beach side. So that's where we're at, Chairman, and that's what I wanted to share with you.
Well, I would suggest we go through all these comments first, and then Dennis, you want to see what his particular zoning is and look at that, and we can address that.
Okay.
You know what your zoning is?
Oh, yeah, we're resident professional.
RP on the whole site?
Yeah, the RP, it is the same zoning that we have for like the Ocean Deck off-site parking and the city's Joe's Crab Shack parking.
So the whole lot is RP?
Yeah, the entire property is zoned RP.
Yeah, I would suggest that you want to address the comments in more detail.
Yeah.
And Jason or Dennis can.
We don't need to slow the process down. We just needed to get ourselves into this process to be very on the record about how we're perceiving the planned development process and everything. And so we understand we're not going to come to an agreement right this second, but we want the board to understand that those are our concerns. We don't think that we're not going to get there. We think it's all here. We just want to make sure that there's specific reference to a unanimous city commission vote on December 19th, 2007 that this shall be planned development. And it is included in the one section. I've got it highlighted in the minutes, the vote, and all that kind of stuff. So
You're concerned that this new code would not allow you to?
I don't know that I read anything in the draft version that said specifically the size requirement for planned development or planned residential development, what the minimum criteria is. I searched and I searched. There is none. So, okay, see, so there's not one in there that allows somebody to pursue that. And
There's not one that would prohibit someone.
it doesn't prohibit it. But so,
Right now, there is a minimum, and if you were less than that, you couldn't, but under the new code, there is not a minimum. So you
okay. We may be able to solve this with the simple correspondence from the redevelopment department. I think, I don't see any reason why we're not going to get there with a simple correspondence. We just we're just making sure that everybody understands what we're talking about. We're dealing with a lot of property worth a lot of money.
I want to talk with them specifically when we go through the other comments, we'll address that.
Okay.
I just
Fair.
wasn't sure of your question.
Well, the-
I think I can count.
Okay, yeah, okay, I think we'll get there. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
My name's John Anderson. I live at 159 Congress Avenue, Daytona Beach, Florida. My wife has a couple of books here. She's going to start on this side with one. I'd like for you to look through them, pass them down, and she'll take them back up. I heard what Mr. Walton was saying a while ago about the conforming and non-conforming of the single-family homes. Well, there's a problem with that. In our neighborhood, when we bought our house, started buying our home, somewhere in here, our homes went from a single-family home to multiple family dwellings. I have a two-bedroom house, as you'll see by the pictures that's going around. You can't put multiple families in that sucker if you got a can opener and a shovel. You ain't gonna do it. So we're wondering where we stand. I realize zoning has got to come into this and this, that, and the other. I'm hearing development on the root canal. I'm hearing development here, development there. We're hoping somewhere in this mix there can be some kind of zoning for us to where we can get back to our single-family homes. And right now I'm about 2 years away from having my house paid off. And at my age, I can't move no more. I'm 64, she's 66. That's all we got. And if we lose it, in a hurricane, God forbid, tornadoes, any kind of storms, fires, whatever, I want to make sure we can be rebuilding. And if this zoning thing that's designated for single family and you're going to get a special exempt and all this, that, and the other, but if you're classified as a multiple family home, we're not covered by that. We're not in that mix. That puts us out there dangling in the wind with $86,119 is just gone. You can't, right now, people are having hard times getting mortgages for homes in our area. And there's $22,000 homes right across the street from me. They're having a hard time getting the insurance. So even if I wanted to sell and they go to the bank's going to give them the money. Then when they come back and they let the bank know where they're at and where they want to buy, the bank turns them down. So we'd like to know what we can do to convince you folks to help us, because we've been in here over and over and over. I got complimented last time being kinder and gentler. Well, I'm not that kind and I ain't that gentle when it starts coming to losing $87,000, really. I don't think any of y'all would be.
Mr. Anderson, the language that is in the code for repair has to do with your use, and your use is single family, and if it burned down, a tornado knocked it down, you would be able to put a single family house back on that without any issues.
I wouldn't have to go through any hoops or rings of fire or anything like that.
You would have to design it. You would be able to submit a building permit meeting the code. If you wanted variances for that, you could still ask for less setback, et cetera, but you could build a house in there without having to go through any other steps, correct?
Okay. That's all I wanted to find out. I'll let you pick up photos.
I think the only difficulty you're going to have will be that you told your wife's age here tonight.
I'm going to pass those down.
Back. Want to get these? Thank you very much.
My wife's 29. For the record, Rob Merrill with Cobb Coal, 149 South Ridgewood. Here on behalf of VCARD and the VCARD committee that spent the last 4 or 5 years working on this. I know it's been accelerated. Rich talked about a couple of months of weekly meetings. We've literally had, I think, dozens of meetings on this. So I'm here to support it. We had a lot of back and forth with staff and with the consultants. We appreciate the time they spent with us and the input that that was received well, I think, and incorporated into changes in the code. A couple of things I do want to say to you all tonight is, first, Rich mentioned that there will be glitch bills to this code. It's almost 800 pages, and it's new, and we're going to be testing it with cases right away. Not right away, thankfully, sometime after the City Commission approval, because I think it's going to take some time to get used to it. And you know, this board has actually, one of the members that's absent tonight has said to me many times in this forum, why are we always changing this code, or why are we always asking for waivers from this code? It's because one code doesn't fit every situation, and we're going to find that it doesn't. These guys did a great job. There's no way they could have thought about every situation in Daytona Beach. They've been in a lot of different places. They spent a lot of time here, but they haven't seen every case. So I'm just saying that on the record for y'all tonight, so you don't ask me that question every time we come forward. It may be on every month's agenda for quite some time to get all the glitch bills sorted out, but we will get it sorted out. I think it's a great work product, and I do also want to mention that we did not read every word of the 800 pages. I don't think anybody did. Well, maybe somebody did. We read the footnotes, and there were many footnotes. These guys did a great job of noting all of the changes in footnotes, explaining them somewhat, and then we would spend time looking at that particular text, because if it wasn't changing, the only thing that we addressed that wasn't changing were things that we knew of that were problematic that we wanted to change. We gave some input on those things. But for the most part, as to the new text, we followed the footnotes into the text. I'm saying that tonight so that and we've said this comment many times, if something wasn't in a footnote, don't hold us to it. Because that's how we got into the text that was changing. So just for the record tonight, again, and for the future when, this thing comes back around several times, that's the way we approached it. And again, we thank you all for your time, staff and the consultants. And I want to publicly thank all the folks that helped from our side on this effort. It wasn't just VCARD members. We actually ended up being the forum through which several members of the public attended and participated. So it was a great effort, and I want to thank you all for incorporating our changes.
Okay. Are there any questions? Actually, we'd like to tell you, too, how much we appreciate your efforts and the rest of those people that spent many, many hours and many days. And it's very much appreciated by this board. Okay. Anybody else, please?
Jean Speeney at 162 North Street. If my old single-family home is considered non-conforming, the Volusia tax appraisal just value it $30,000. I have it up for sale and just received an offer of $30,000, but the offer contingency that the new owner can remodel the home with new electric, plumbing, AC, first-class kitchen that will equal the purchase cost of $30,000. What is the appropriate response to the potential buyer?
Somebody's offered to purchase her home, but they want to put improvements into the property that equal the value of the home. So $30,000 worth of improvements into the home. And so she wants to know if it's a non-conforming use.
Use would be allowed to put back. I'm not sure.
What I'm trying to do is, I'm selling my house, let's say, okay, and I'm selling my house for $30,000, and the buyer is wanting to remodel the house, new plumbing, new electric, AC, whatever, and they want to spend between $30,000 and $35,000. Is that going to be a problem?
Single-family uses, even if it's non-conforming, is
It's
permitted.
non-conforming.
Yes, it would be permitted.
It would be
in this code,
permitted.
yes.
Okay.
And that's what that section of the code I read.
Well, that section pertains to reconstruction or repair after casualty damage, so I'm not sure that's the section that we should be looking at.
one that we're using now.
8.2D is a section that talks, I'm sorry, it's 8.2 talks about non-conforming uses. And as long as there's not an expansion of the use, in other words, he's not expanding the house, he's just
Fixing it up, fixing
I
it.
think right now, if you go down to the city, they won't let you do that because you can't spend more money than the house is worth or something.
Oh, yeah.
Is that-
Okay.
So my question is, what would I tell the buyer? Continuously that they could do this.
We need to look at it, like not under 2 seconds, but I think you'd be all right under 8.2F if we tweak some language to say any reconstruction or repair of a non-conforming structure shall be subject to the same provisions applicable to casualty damage, which means you can, because you're a single-family owner-occupied home. Right, a single-family home?
Yes,
And
but not occupied, but I'm selling it.
But that person would be occupying it.
But it's non-conforming because it's multifamily. You have it zoned, it will be zoned for multifamily.
As long as that buyer is going to live there as an owner-occupied home,
Okay,
then it would be okay.
okay, but it doesn't say it now.
It does.
We need to tweak it a little bit, but it is in there.
We added in the other section is what she's saying. What the language I read under the one section will add to the 8.2 section as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Chris Don, 132 Pierce Avenue. Specifically, there is some confusion still about the base zoning of a property. It talks about in the non-conforming of, it would be if it's a single-family dwelling. I would like to know how a single family is defined. Is it based on the pictures you saw? It's a house, so therefore it's considered that by the city in the text because it's a single family residence? Or does it go by if it's zoned single family, which is an R1 zoning category? So I would like some clarification on how that's defined, if it's by how the structure looks, or is it on the base zoning in the text?
That particular provision applies to owner-occupied, single-family detached dwellings, so that's the use, not the zoning.
Okay. All right. So even if it was zoned business automotive or
If it's an owner-occupied, single-family dwelling, they will be able to rebuild.
And then the second question is, I personally went through Hurricane Andrew in Miami. A lot of people didn't settle with their insurance companies till possibly a year after the storm, okay? Because they had, contractors that were, going through and doing assessments. So if let's say I'm zoned business automotive right now, and I have to leave my house because it's 80% destroyed and it's non-conforming, okay? Is it going to revert back to the original zoning of business automotive? Or am I going to be allowed to move back into my house as you're telling me? Because I do know there's a clock tick.
You're worried about the 6-month rule, and I'm sure that if a hurricane came through and wiped out and people couldn't get rebuilt within 6 months, you would be all right. Whether it might be an emergency resolution or something that's passed that says, hey, there's a moratorium, or, it's something we would have to address at that time, but
I would
that's
feel
not
much
something.
more comfortable if we could put that in the text, that if there was some kind of state of an emergency that was proclaimed, that this became a disaster area, that maybe this 6-month or 3-month, if you're in a redevelopment area, would be looked at or be exempted because of the disaster.
Well, it says it doesn't apply. It says the result of a natural disaster or other unforeseen and unpreventable accident, and you're in a owner-occupied single-family dwelling.
Okay.
These rules don't apply.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I have another statement about the Article 4. It talks about the, I think it's Section 9J for the overlay districts. And you do have the Arts District in there. So you had the placeholder before when you came out with Module 2, there was just a placeholder there. But now you have the text in there. My question is, like in the redevelopment areas, they have the separate categories of like RDD zoning. Where are the categories for the Arts District for the buildings that will be existing in the Arts District? You don't have that. You have AO established as the zoning category for Arts District, but you don't have the specific category for a detached house with a art studio garage. Do you understand? It doesn't exist in the current zoning, and it would need to be put in
The
there.
art district basically is a district, we set down the framework and the process to have an art district designation.
Right.
About 65% of the property owners have to petition the art district. A plan has to be prepared by staff, and then you have to move to a property. In that plan, you identify the types of uses, like single family or art studios, etc. The kind of uses we want, and that would be placed in the district. It would have to be adopted by the city.
Right, but in the other overlay districts, you already have the zoning categories in there. That's why I was a little bit confused why you didn't put them in there to begin with.
Because a plan wasn't
Okay. All right. And the other thing is that there is also no zoning category outside of a redevelopment area for where you have, in a redevelopment area, it's allowed to have a business on the ground floor, such as a restaurant or a shop, and have an office and a residence upstairs on the second floor. That's specific also to historic neighborhoods especially. If you're in a neighborhood that has not been classified as a historic district or a redevelopment area, the existing use of those buildings that were once really historic, of having a business on the ground floor and a resident or an office upstairs, are presently not allowed in the current zoning code. And I would like that to be addressed as well, because I believe that prohibits investment in the older neighborhoods, which was one of the main categories. And then finally, my last statement is going to be on plan development. I believe that one of the primary reasons that we were doing the rewrite was so that we could get more development in our city and more economic opportunity in our city. But to me, if we're doing all this work of 800 pages, people should be able to go down to permits and licensing and get straight zoning on their property, okay? They shouldn't be allowed to do a plan development unless it's the absolute last case scenario, because really what they're saying is the code that you've written is not satisfactory enough, and we need to bypass it because there's some glitch. So I think you should really make plan developments the last possible scenario for someone, because they should be able to come in and just go down, pull their permits, and write a check for them, or have a staff review that before they get their permits. But the fact is, there shouldn't be all of this big mess if you do your jobs right. Do you understand that? People should just be able to go in and get permits without any big issue. So if they want special consideration, I think definitely you should guarantee that they pass a surety bond, that if they don't break ground on their property in either 3 years or 5 years, you guys can decide. You can work with the builders on that. But if they want an extension and they haven't built, they should lose their surety bond. You see? That puts the incentive on them to follow through. Then we wouldn't have all these vacant lots all over the city like we have. That's my final opinion. Thank you.
Yes.
If I could just respond to one question about the residences on the second floor or above the businesses. If you look on page 5.3 in the use table, there is a category called upper story dwellings, which allows for residential units in a number of the business districts. So that's permitted. Well, office can be above, and these uses allow them to.
Okay. Does anyone else, please?
John Nicholson, 413 North Grandview Avenue. It's been 7 years, so I'm going to ask again. Floor area ratio and submerged land. If you remember 7 years ago, we were talking about this, and you said, well, we were going to discuss it, but we're not going to discuss it because we're doing the land development code, and it will be in there. And so several times a year I've been asking you, is it in here? So I'm asking, hopefully, finally, did we address the floor area ratio, and did we address submerged land? Jeff, you read all 700 pages. It's not in here?
Only 680.
Oh.
I must have missed that one.
And then Tracy Remark's not here, and she's the only other person would have read all of them. Secondly, I'm assuming from on page 8, it talks about the hotel parking, that when we have large hotels with restaurants, et cetera, that we don't double dip. In other words, we don't require them to have X number of parking spaces for the hotel, an additional 600 for the restaurant, and another 50 for any business and whatnot. So I hope we address that so they don't end up overextending the number of parking spaces. I believe you also addressed landscaping, that there was some wiggle room on landscaping, so we don't end up with like 6 million tiny plants that never get used. Lot size, I think we addressed on page 8. Main Street zoning, I don't understand. You rezoned it. I came in this morning to talk to staff, and apparently staff wasn't in today, and nobody in the department was in. So 9, 10, and 11, does that rezone the end of Main Street, the west side, that's been neglected for 35 years, and we were going to change it 20 years ago and put it on hold because it's business automotive on the west side, and everything gets stopped at Hollywood. Nothing gets done past Hollywood. So did we rezone that so that it can be part of Main Street? We know? Because I don't know what 9, 10, 11 means. Because RDB 1, RDB 4 are all gone. It's just...
The simple explanation is there is no rezoning happening with this. There's a conversion. If you have this zoning, it tells you what the new designation would be.
So what's 9, 10, and 11?
There are some categories that no one has and will have upon adoption of this, but they're available for someone to request to rezone to based on the uses that are there, et cetera. And I think
There's Mudridge. Okay, the present 17 or 18 zones that we have in the Main Street redevelopment has now been down to 3?
All those will be, if whatever the existing zoning is, the conversion chart will show you exactly what the zoning is going to be. If you're talking, I think the ones you're talking about, I don't know, Jason or Reed addressed that, are properties that don't have that. No one has asked for that zoning. They're zoning categories I think they're seeing a market for, people wanting, and I can let Reed elaborate on that, but why don't you finish your questions and we can address your comment.
E-zone. You were going to sort of kind of almost maybe do something on the E-zone. It was passed 5 years ago, and it's kind of sitting out there until the land development code came through. Did we do anything with the E-zone? Can they finally say it's happening, or is it in here?
It's in our comprehensive plan.
So it's done. So they can...
In the comprehensive plan.
Okay, and it's in the land development code.
There's a placeholder for it. The rezoning has not occurred.
Okay. And lastly, on page 5, the 20,000 square feet is, actually I got 2 things. The 20,000 square feet can go through staff without having to come to the public. That's 3 city blocks on Main Street can be wiped out without any input from the public. That doesn't make sense to me. You said, I think on page 5 it says it's a staff approval. It doesn't have to go to the public anymore.
If it's 20,000 square feet or less, yes, correct.
Yeah,
Staff would approve it based on the criteria in the code.
So in other words, somebody can come in, buy 3 blocks of Main Street and wipe out all the buildings, and they...
20,000 is...
20,000 square feet is 3 city blocks in Main Street.
But I mean, that's always been in the code.
No, Nope.
I think it was.
Not in the redevelopment areas. We fought this several years
I'll
ago.
let Reed address that.
Okay.
When you're finished.
And lastly, you use the phrase minor variations, that staff approval, because I need a little bit stronger word on minor, because staff approved a purple building one time, which is not in Main Street, because Main Street has all these pastels. Secondly, a staff approved a nightclub next to a residential area, and you can talk to Ouija. She's in the back, and she lives, and she's familiar with confettis that turn into lollipops. No, they have 4 parking spaces and 10,000 square... Dennis!
I didn't realize John Nicholson had this kind of power.
Yes. So, a staff approved a nightclub next to a residential neighborhood with virtually no parking.
Hurry, we only have 20 more minutes of power. Hurry.
Yeah, and then the hurricanes hit. So I'm concerned with the minor things that you're giving staff way too much power. 20,000 square feet, that's 3 city blocks. It's a lot for somebody just to willy-nilly decide that they're going to wipe out 3 city blocks. Allowing somebody, and they have in the past, allowing an adult nightclub next to a residential neighborhood with no parking, and then all these people park in the residential neighborhood. And they had to end up putting in roundabouts to prevent the problems. You can ask the people that lived out in Seabreeze what a mess it was. So I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable allowing staff to have such tremendous, and then the residents have no say. And it seems like you're saying that the residents no longer have any say. Thank you.
Craig, you might want to address that specific.
I can certainly respond to several. In terms of the issues with respect to submerged lands and floor area ratio. We have a section in the definitions called measurement on page 11-13, in which floor area ratio for non-residential and for residential properties is spelled out, how it's measured and defined. The issue of submerged lands is also addressed there in calculating lot area under A1 on page 11-13. With respect to the issue of the threshold for the review of site plans, minor and major site plans, first of all, 20,000 square feet is basically, most blocks I'm aware of are city blocks, even the smallest in a larger urban area are 500 feet by, 200 or 300 feet, which is about 100, is significantly more than 20 feet is actually, certainly as someone goes up 2 stories, which a lot of development, commercial development is, it's actually fairly small. Our experience, and we've drafted and had approved over 100 development codes in the last 15 or 20 years, is that in a city the size of Daytona Beach, 20,000 square feet is not a large development, and in fact many communities are having staff review site plans that are much larger than that. This issue has been on the table a long time. I'm sure there are differences of opinion in the community about this issue, but as I mentioned in the presentation, we have done 2 things. One is when we increase that threshold, we have also tried to include a lot more specific criteria and standards, measurable standards, so there's much less latitude in terms of how you apply the standards that would be reviewed in site plan review. So,
Okay.
those are 2 issues I can certainly respond to.
Is there anybody else in the audience like to speak? Yes, would you like to come up for the second act?
He's going to speak 4 this time.
John Nicholson, 413 North Granbury Avenue. We hit this 20,000 a couple of years ago, but on Main Street itself, there are 7 blocks that have 1 or 2 businesses on it. You've seen Cruisin' Cafe is 1 city block, as well as the building across from it. You've heard of Boot Hill and Main Street Station? That is 1 city block. So we have 7 of them that are 1 city blocks that are definitely way less than 500, and we have no block on Main Street that is 500 feet. Thank you.
– 20,000 square feet is, relative to what other communities are doing, is quite small. And in terms of your block sizes, I'll let staff respond to that. But in terms of 20,000 square feet, there, like I said before, many local governments are letting staff approve projects, site plan review projects that are much larger than that.
Yeah. Reed, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on?
Well, I thought, real quickly, that there's a couple things. RDB 6, 7, 8, 9. There are some that are new that are in there that you'll see in the LDC rewrite. They are placeholders, and it will take actions by the redevelopment board and go through that whole process before we go back and discuss the potential rezoning in the future. But right now, they're placeholders. So that's the explanation why you see some other new ones.
I think it's like the RDM, all the Midtown ones are all new. They're placeholders, and you're in the process of doing a rezoning to.
And they're descriptive about where they apply. So that should do it.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to this? Otherwise, I'm going to close down the public. Okay, let's close it down.
How much is going to do land
Would you come forward, please?
I just looked about that. I'd like to buy one of your books. It's bigger than the Bible, so I mean.
It's online.
Yeah. I don't want to take all that time, but there's football. I'm just going to bracket file.
We have one in our office. If you want to give me a call tomorrow, we can.
Okay, I'm not file. Okay.
Rich, did you want to speak to anything?
Yeah, one of the things that we have to do, and I know Craig covered it in his PowerPoint, is consistency with the comprehensive plan. Their contract is that as they drafted this, and as part of the review, they were, and I know this was a difficult land development code because we have so much specific regulations in our comprehensive plan. Not that many comprehensive plans have the level of detail of height requirements and setbacks and uses in a comprehensive plan, which is a little bit more general. But in their contract, they drafted this, and then each piece or each module was also reviewed by staff, and we believe it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think Craig did cover that in his PowerPoint, but might want to repeat that for the record. I know that that's one of the concerns, that it's a requirement of state law that land development codes implement the comprehensive plan, and it's consistent.
The code implements and is consistent.
Our opinion. And any other questions anyone else has specifically, we've got as many staff as we need to help answer that. But I don't have anything additional to add to our presentation.
I think they did a great job, presenting it, and I'm agreeing with Mr. Merrill. I know that it won't be exactly pure science, because there's going to be some situations that will come up. But I think that's another thing that they did in here, is to allow for those situations to come up. And a lot of times at staff level, instead of having to move forward to like a formal board or delay it or whatever, and giving staff a little more latitude, which I think is good.
Are there any questions of staff? Are there any additional questions? From visitors who are not visitors anymore because they've been here so often. If not,
Make a motion that we recommend the city commission on the land development code rewrite.
Second.
a motion and a second.
Could you make that clear that that includes the chart, the email
That includes everything presented.
the staff recommendation?
Yeah.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Takes care of that. Thank you very much. Are there any staff comments you want to make? I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight.
Oh, okay. I want to, before everyone on the board leaves, I want to remind you, we have a meeting next Thursday. We had hoped to get the package to you, but with everything else we had going on, we're going to getting you those tomorrow. I can assure you, though, that this month's meeting is a lot lighter than last month and lighter than next month is going to be in terms of the planning board meeting next Thursday.
We just got 2 things, don't we?
Yes.
It's all right.
I thought the union rule was that you can't have a meeting.
Couldn't have another one this week. That's the rules, not next week.
All right, we're adjourned.